Hi guys, my name is Jared Coffman. I'm a lead framer with Coffman Construction, and today we're going to be building this custom home on a step foundation. So we're going to show you guys how we snap out the foundation to make sure everything is parallel and square, and then we're going to go through some things you can do to prep your crew for framing to save time. Things like cut list, story poles, and material staging. Let's get into it. So the foundation is arguably the most important part of the house because that's what supports the rest of the house. If it's just sitting on the ground can erode, all that stuff. So having a solid concrete foundation is very critical. Now the reason it's stepped like this is usually due to the grade. You can see up at the top, the ground was flush with the garage, but down here in the basement, it's flush with this slab. So the reason they step the foundation is so that way we can do framed walls above the grade and keep the concrete where it's below the grade. That's easier to run electrical, plumbing, whatever, through the framed walls and insulating. Having more frame exposed above the ground also gives you more options for windows and things like that.
I'm John Coffman, and we're out here starting this new build today, and you can kind of see behind me here, we got this fresh slab covered with concrete blankets, and we have to do that to make sure that the slab doesn't freeze and crack. So they don't look the greatest, but they serve a purpose. And even though it's bright and sunny out, if you get any of the trees in this shot, you can see that they're covered in frost. And so it's pretty chilly. I think it was 14 degrees when we started this morning. So slab got poured this last week, so these blankets will be able to come off soon and we'll have a cleaner site. So, but they do serve a purpose.
So for this stage of the building process, we're going to be using a few different tools. The main, most important ones being 100-foot tape and a chalk line. Some other ones that can help make this a little easier would be a 360-degree plane laser or a squaring laser. And then this is also optional, but it does help, especially if you have weather, and that's clear spray paint. We use that to cover the chalk lines after you put them to help keep them weatherproof. And you also won't get far without a set of blueprints. And a bottle of chalk.
It's our plan set here, kind of got an overview page here on the front, and we get into the things that we really care about, notes, which we look at when we need to. And here's our lower level plan. So mainly interior framing, we've got our walkout walls down here. And then the main page that we end up really using, the main level plan, which gives us all of our outside dimensions, all of our interior walls, but the whole plan of the house and what we're going to be doing today, snapping this thing out. We'll be using all of these dimensions here to get our overall plan and make sure that this thing is built per this drawing.
So the first thing we'll do when we're snapping it is you usually want to find the longest corner that you can in order to determine where you square from. And there's ways to get creative with that. But for us, it'll probably be easiest to use the garage first because this is all on one plane, because we've got all those foundation steps over here that we can get this nice and square, and then we can start to work our measurements from there using the laser and the 100-foot tape measure and potentially a little bit of math. Yeah, so let's go walk over this and then we can start to snap that out. So it really helps to orient the plans in the direction of the house where you're actually standing. So you can see the garage here. Where I'm standing is probably right about here. That corner is probably where we'll start, right over there. So yeah, we'll get started with that. All right, so when we're snapping our first wall, we basically just pull 5.5 from the exterior. That's where our frame is gonna sit. We're gonna mark it on that side, and then we'll snap it across. And that's the easiest wall we're going to snap all day.
That's right. I'm good.
Now that we have that line determined, we can do something called 3-4-5 across here. So this width is about, what was it,
23 foot 4.5.
So if this is our 3, we could do 7, multiple of 7, 21 foot.
Yep.
So how 3-4-5 works, it's basically a math principle that it's the same concept as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And with a right triangle, if the length of this is 3, the length of this is 4, the hypotenuse will always be 5. And you can use that at any multiple you want. So what we did is we took 3 times 7, that's 21 here. Then we're going to do 4 times 7, that's going to be 28 there. And then our diagonal will be 5 times 7, 35. So we'll mark that, and that'll give us our exact 90-degree corner. There's 21. Right there, I'm just gonna intersect that. There you go.
Hey, like it there?
Yep.
So here we arc this mark and we're gonna intersect our two lines here. So.
28.
Like it?
Right there.
There's our spot.
The walls we just snapped are this wall and this wall. So we don't need to, we're not gonna now square from here to here. We're gonna instead pull parallel from here across. Same goes for these two front walls. We'll pull parallel from this back wall.
On the line there, okay. And I'm gonna hit the front wall at the same time here. Hooking the edge of the foundation is good there. Look a little skinny here, but I think it'll work. Like it? Good? Oh, that's a beautiful thing. All right, so we can get these parallels coming across. So we got 12 foot and then 22 foot 3. And then I'm gonna pull this one back here.
So Derek holds here on the same dimension on this side. Our wall doesn't go all the way through, but we just marked it there so we can transfer through so we know we're nice and parallel and square.
You can be down tight on it, Derek, because that's top of foundation.
Yeah, they're the same height.
Tell me when you like it. Okay. I'm gonna hold this down here so I don't get a nice red chalk line on the garage slab. All right, let's do some quick math on our overall. We'll pull that outside. 34 foot 3 out to out. You got a 35? I'm 5.5 on the line.
So go ahead and mark 5.5 back.
All right, 5.5 on the line. Okay, go for it.
So now that we have the whole garage snapped, we can pull our other dimensions out from it, maintaining our square dimensions. So I'm gonna give them dimensions from here, reading to each of these steps. We're gonna work our way across that way.
So 5.5 on the line there. What we're doing now is we've gotten all this area squared and snapped, and we're snapping out into this area of the foundation now. And what we've got is we've got our long wall that we squared from here, and we pulled parallel up and got these guys. And so now what we're gonna do is get this wall, and this wall snapped. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull a parallel from this back point of the garage wall up to here in both of these locations, and I'll snap this guy through all the way to the outside here. That'll give us a long straight line, and we can pull, once we have this guy done, we can pull up to the front wall and up to this wall here, and we'll have the best chance of staying nice and parallel because we pulled a long parallel line through to the outside of the foundation here. So that's what we're gonna do now. Like it? Okay, you can hold it down and snap it when you're ready. Perfect.
So now pulling from that long line we snapped to snap the rest of this wall.
We're at almost 5 here. We're a little under across this front, but it's not bad. So I figure this is mostly cantilevered here, so
yep,
should be good. Okay, so the question now is parallel. We've got this guy marked here, just the top step.
I think we might as well
just
snap it.
Yeah.
And then we can just snap that just because we'll need to anyways. Yeah. And then we'll laser squared off of this line to that. We can mark down those steps, and then we can jump over to this side.
Sounds good.
So for this next step, we're gonna be using the 360-degree plane laser and the receiver. I wouldn't recommend doing this without a receiver because this really helps you get the accuracy you need. What's great about this one, we've got this knob here, which lets us finely rotate it, so you're not just barely nudging it. You can't even tell it moved, and on the other side of the house, it's moved like 3 feet. This will get you those super fine adjustments. What's great about this is it'll shoot you your perfect 90 degrees, but it'll shoot you, like it said, in a 360-degree plane. So it's great for shooting down steps because you can mark it at each corner. And now my dad's gonna explain how they used to do that before we had alien technology to help us.
So back in the day, we were actually just discussing this, like how much easier it makes it having these lasers, because we would have to get a builder's level out, which was like we would call it a transit, but it wasn't a transit. It was just a level, a sight level. Think of it like a scope, and set that thing up and have it perfectly level, and have to shoot everything in for our heights that way, and then use a regular level and somebody holding the other end of a tape measure and hoping somebody wasn't off when they were holding it to get down every step, and it made it a lot more challenging. And there was times where things would get off, guys would do math and it would be a little bit wrong, and you'd end up with walls that you built for your walkout that were out of level, you know, as you start to joist things. So kind of a quick funny story, we were doing a walkout once that was a pretty simple walkout. It was just a big rectangle, so steps went down, but somebody did some bad math, it might have been me, and our walls ended up being 1.5 inches short, and we joisted the whole floor, sheeted it, everything worked, until we went to stand up our sheeted and squared walls, and they were out of plumb. So it was a tough fix, but got it done. So anyways, this makes it way easier. So I'm a big fan of this technology. I'm not getting any beep. There we go. Back. Back more. Keep going. There, other way. Good. Oh.
I mean, I barely touched it. Are you able to see where it's hitting? Sometimes if you look at the sensor at just the right angle, you can see where the laser's hitting it.
Good, good. I mean, you got to go a skosh that way, but you're there.
You should get solid tone if it's good.
Yeah, it all went away. I mean, the screen's still on, but there's no level line or no mark or...
I might have accidentally adjusted it too far.
Okay, this way. Back. There.
There it is. And you can bring the receiver over here, and we'll use the receiver to mark the other points. So now that we've got our laser calibrated square off of our chalk lines, we can use our receiver and mark it on as many points as we can reach. So we'll mark it on the window, I guess, and then we'll set it then on top of the window.
We're missing this right now.
Maybe can we hit the outside corner?
So what do you want to do? Do you want to just
I think we
go
can
to here?
Now put the laser there, get the receiver as far back on this line as it can go, and then set it again. So using this method, we can basically reset the laser on multiple points and bring that square straight line all the way down. I'll take that. All day long, I'll take that. And just like that, we're marked all the way down. So now we just need to, we can plumb down these sides.
Like it?
Yep.
Go for it. Good, go for it.
Here we go, that's one side of the walkout done.
Okay.
All right, now we'll pretty much rinse and repeat the same process on that side. There'll be a couple things that are a little bit different though. On this side, conveniently enough, our exterior wall is right in line with that garage wall. So we're gonna snap it through off of this dimension right here.
Derek, do you want to hook it on that side and then come back and grab this other end so we don't snap the slab?
Here, I can do that.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah, just tell me you like it there?
That's great.
Okay, go for it.
So we've got what we need to get the laser set up again. So we're gonna put the laser on that corner right by that beam pocket, and then I'll put the receiver over here and we'll fine adjust it until we're in line. Then we'll mark all those steps. That's right about there. Right on time.
All All right, so we're trying to pull our dimensions now off of the front lines that we snapped through here and getting back to the back walls of the house now. So we're gonna pick this line here because on the step of the foundation, we can get it on this corner. And we've also got a step over here at this side that'll be about the same height that we'll be able to plumb back down to then be able to pull these lines up to this one and back to this wall. So we've done the math on this side wall here, and we're 53 feet from the outside of the front wall to the outside of the back wall here. And then we have this line that we snapped through earlier in the garage, and it's 48'6" from there to the same point here to make this completely parallel across the back here.
So how we're gonna mark this outside dimension is my dad is pulling 2 foot from our outside on that side. We're gonna plumb down to the height of this lower step wall, and then we can pull from that 2 foot dimension the rest of our dimension. 53 feet minus 2 foot, so we'll be marking 51 feet.
You wanna toss me the little laser and I'll just set it on this guy?
Like it?
Yep. Mark all the way down too, because we can pull it all the way onto the slab, you know what I'm saying? I mean, onto the actual plate. Okay, and then let me do the math on that side back to the garage wall here. Like from this line back to the garage wall, because that'll be better, and then we can do the same thing off of that step.
Okay.
Last thing we're doing is saving our lines. So since we're winter in Colorado, we want to not lose all the lines that we just put on the foundation. So we're going to spray them down with some clear marking paint to keep them on the foundation where we want them. So we use red chalk, which is semi-permanent, but it seems like if we get a little bit of weather on them, they can go away. So that's the last thing we got to do, and then we're done for now.
All right, so now the foundation is all snapped out. So the important thing to do to double check to make sure everything you're doing is right, as we come down both sides, where we meet in the middle, you wanna check that dimension to make sure it's right. Now in this case, we ended up being about 3/16 off or so, which is not too bad considering the framing. So what we did is we adjusted on each side, each dimension about 3/32, and that basically changes one dimension being 3/16 off to two being 3/32 off. Puts us much closer to within tolerance, and as we frame up, we're gonna keep getting tighter and tighter, and we're gonna re-snap on our main level at the original dimension, and it's gonna get us even closer. Now, if you remember from the original Larry Hahn videos, they just pull 5.5, check for parallel and square, and run with it. The reason we don't do that in this case is only because the trusses for this project are ordered to this exact plan, and they're already manufactured. So we can't have anything changing. But it is pretty common to have trusses manufactured after the walls are framed, in which case they'll measure and build to exactly as they're framed. That's nice because if your foundation isn't 100% perfect, your walls can still fit on it perfectly, and then you can have your roof made to order. But this way is great as far as being able to plan ahead and have things put into production before it's too late. With the green plate done, what I like to do is I can have guys working on a cut list while we're doing the green plate. So here's how I make that cut list. So you're gonna need to use the plans, and you're gonna need the window schedule. And we're lucky the architect put this window schedule right on the architectural floor plan. So we're gonna pick a window. We'll do this window A, which is a 24 by 48 window, and that's the RO. So these walls are 10 foot 1 1/8, which is a 1/16 5/8 pre-cut stud. Now all I need to know is I need to know my header height, my RO, and then in the structural page, it will tell me what the header call out is. You can find A on the plans. Right here, it's a little pantry window. So I can go to the structural plan and see here that gets a double 2x8 header. Now we have a detail on these plans that show what size or how many trimmers and kings you need for different size windows. Here we go, right here. So if the opening is under 4 feet, 1 king, 1 jack, 1 sill. If it's under 8 feet, 2 kings, 2 jacks, 2 sills. Under 12 feet, 3 kings, 2 jacks, 2 sills. Under 16 feet, 4 kings, 3 jacks, and 2 sills. So we can use all that information together to make our cut list. And we're gonna do that using what's called a story pole. So let's check that out now. So as I said, our wall is gonna be 10 foot 1 1/8, which uses 1/16 5/8 studs. That's because we'll have 1.5 inches for a bottom plate on the bottom of the stud and 3 inches for the double top plate on the top of the stud. So here's how we'll lay this out. I'll hold 1.5 inches on the bottom of the stud because will represent my bottom plate. I can pull all the way up. My header height was 8 feet. I'm just gonna mark 8 feet and then another 1.5 inches. And then our window size is 4 feet tall. So now I'm gonna come back to 4 feet, mark that. This is less than 4 feet wide, so we only need a single sill. So I'm gonna come down 1.5 inches. And then lastly, from the top, I'm gonna pull down 7 1/4. And that is what our header is gonna be. At the end of the day, our wall is gonna look like this. I have header here, top cripple here, top sill here. Here's our RO. This is also where our trimmer is gonna go. Here's our bottom sill and our bottom cripple. So I can now take all these measurements and use them to make my cut list. So my bottom cripples for this size window are gonna be 45 inches long. My trimmers for this are gonna be 109 3/8. Now the reason for that is I run my trimmers all the way to the top and we put our header at the top of the wall and then we cripple down to our opening. I'll explain more on that while we're framing the walls. Then I can measure from my top sill to the bottom of that header. I've got 13 5/16 for my top cripples, and then both of your sills are always going to be the width of your opening. So because this is a 2 foot wide opening, these two sills are going to be 2 feet wide. So that's how you can use a story pole to figure out your window cut list. I'll also use the number of jack studs or trimmers with the length of our RO to get the length of our header. So we already know our header is a double 2x8 and this width only needs 1 trimmer on each side. So we're going to add 1.5 inches for each trimmer. So if this width is 2 foot, plus a trimmer on each side, we're gonna cut this header at 2'3". So as you remember, our window list was all alphabetical. So each window has a corresponding letter that shows where it goes on the plans and what pieces go with it. So we used that and we made our cut list for all of our walls down here for these walkout walls. So you can see we've got W, we've got K, we've got G, and then this is a big one. This one wasn't alphabetical because it's so big. This is our 12-foot sliding door. This is ideally how the cut list looks. You can see we've got our header on the bottom, we've got some sills, and we've got some top cripples. Now the reason you don't see the bottom cripples for these windows is because these walkout walls are gonna be framed straight to the green plate, which isn't perfectly level because we bolted it tight. And we're gonna use a chalk line strung up high to cut each stud at an exact length. So the bottom cripple number is going to vary, but everything from the header and up will be exactly the same. So we'll measure and cut our bottom cripples in place, but everything else we can have pre-cut and ready for us. So now with the foundation snapped, our next step to get us framing is to get all the green plate on our chalk lines. So there's a few different things we're gonna do. We're gonna be using Sill Seal. We're gonna be using a sealant to help with air and bugs sealing. It's just sort of an extra thing that can help with the tightness of a house that really doesn't cost any extra. And then we'll go over how to lay out your bolts properly so your plate goes right on the chalk line. So when he's setting his green plate, he's gonna set it against the bolts. He's gonna make sure he's right on his line where he wants the board to end, and he can pull 5.5 on this side and he can set his board on the line on that side to make sure he's right. And then he can go through and mark all of his bolts. And you just need to mark centers for these. So now he sets the board on its side and he can use his tape measure to measure from the line to the center of the bolt. And he can transfer that right over to his center line.
So the next thing we're doing on this project, we have the main floor foundation plated with sill nuts and washers on it, but not fully fastened because we're gonna go around the whole foundation and make sure it's level. And how we do that is we find the high point. So we already found the high point and we set up our laser to match with this device here that reads it even though we can't see it with our eye because it's bright out. That's why this tool is really cool. So we're gonna go around the whole main floor and check it. And how you check it is we put it on a 2x4, some people put it on a level. We wanna make sure it's plumb both this way and this way, because the laser will read it and we'd want to make sure that it's the same height on all these places that we check. So what we'll do is we'll put our cat's paw underneath the plate and put shims in if it's low. Once you hear that solid tone beep, that means we're right in line with that laser that we put up, and we're gonna go around the whole place, put shims on the spots that are low, and we already found the high spot, so we don't need to worry about it being too high. So that's what we're gonna do first. Make sure that our floor is gonna be nice and level for when we build our first story walls.
Okay, so we're almost done with the main floor, getting this all nice and level. So I just kind of want to show you guys this whole thing we already checked. I'm going to start here and show you the solid tone. Okay, so we have solid tone here. Solid tone there. And then that corner is good. And then if you come over here, this corner where this bolt is on this piece is also solid tone. But over on this little piece, you can see it with your eye even. It kind of slopes down a little bit. So that's telling me that I gotta have some shims over on this edge. And I can confirm that by just putting my stick here and it's reading that arrow pointing up. And if I just bring this up, it'll hit my solid tone and it's showing maybe about 2 shims. So I'll go ahead and put those shims on. It should read solid and then good to go. Wow. Still more. So with this shimmed up now to where this is not slanted downhill, when you put the stick on it, you read a pretty solid tone right there. And right there.
Beautiful.
All right, so now to start framing our walkout walls, where these are over a step foundation, what we do in order to ensure these walls are nice and flat and level is we're gonna set a post on each corner. We'll set one here, 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 and each corner all the way to there. And then we'll use our level that we use to level our plates and we'll mark our stud height. Then we'll set a nail and we'll run a chalk line across there that we can butt our studs up to while they rest on the green plate to measure them to length. Then we can just cut the chalk line and we're good to go. So we're gonna set those posts now. Our chalk lines are set to the inside of the plate. It's important to always prioritize your studs to the inside of the plate if there happens to be any discrepancy in the width of your material. So even though the stud is in on this end, it's flush on this end, which is what's on our chalk line. All right, I'll grab some of those studs in that level and we can level this guy. All right, bring it to you quite a bit. Too much, a little more to me. A little more, touch more, beautiful. Like it? Hopefully you like it because I'm nailing it. To you, more. Back to me a little bit, too much. More to you, good. All right, so we've got our receiver on that plate, which is already leveled. Now that in particular level, it's set exactly 6 inches above where it's sitting at. So I can use that to help me figure out our heights here. So I can set my receiver. Can mark my line. Now to the top of my double top plate is 6 inches down from here. So I can mark that, and then like I said, that's the top of my double top plate. So I can come down another 3 inches and that's my stud height. So I'll square that onto both faces. So when we're ready, we can string our line from there. And then this post is ready to go. So we just put our post that goes right here on this corner. And what I like to do with the houses we frame is I like to pick one corner in the house and pull all of the layout from that corner. So we're gonna use that corner as our layout corner. So now that I have my plumb post, I can pull my studs that way and then this way, and then we'll use that number to transfer our layout onto all the rest of the plates so we can frame our walkout walls. So here's my corner, start pulling 15 1/4 and go. Which basically means I'm gonna be marking 3/4 towards my hook back from all the red marks. This ensures that the center of our studs are gonna be on the 16-inch increments. So here we've got our post there, and this is where we die into the foundation wall. So we have this plate ran long, so that way we can have 4 feet of overlap from our double top plates together. That really just keeps everything tied together and there won't be any seam or pivot point. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna run a stud tight against the concrete up to this. I'm gonna seal it to this to reduce any air barrier, and then I'll be able to put my line on that so I can string a chalk line across here. So my length here is gonna be 28 5/8. I really want to make sure I'm completing that seal. So I'm going to come from there and over just to make sure there's no dead spots, more or less. And a nice thick bead is good because this concrete is not a flat surface. Connect that to the bead up top. I'm ready to roll. Same rule applies with this, where you want to favor the inside because that's where our chalk line is. So I'm first going to nail them together. And then we can use what we call the concrete nailer. This is the HN 120 by Max with 2.5-inch pins. These are great for shooting into concrete. So now we've got a solid sealed connection to the foundation. So next step is to mark down my 3 inches so I can set my chalk line. So now with my stud mark, I can set a nail right on my line. I'll run it across to this post. So while there's still slack in the line, you can make a loop, twirl it around your finger several times. You can put it over the nail. Now, you're gonna use both your hands. One hand, you're gonna be pulling slack from the first nail, and this hand, you're gonna be pulling slack this way. And you can just keep pulling that as tight as, well, yeah, not that tight. That was just me showing you what would happen if you tied it too tight for learning experiences. As I was saying, loop around the finger, twirl it several times, put it over your nail, pull the slack out, and then pull this side back. And that's gonna twist up on itself and lock it. Then you can just lock your chalk line, and it can hang right there. And now we've got a nice straight line that we can use to measure and mark our studs. So we're using the weed burner to melt all the ice, but we need to not only melt it, we need to get it dry, so that way we can use our Lexcel sealant in order to seal our sill seal in our bottom plate to the foundation. So Landon's burning that, we're getting the ice up. We're gonna do the same thing in our caissons here, because we're gonna be setting beams, floor girders, across these walkout walls with posts sitting down in these caissons. So we're gonna melt all this ice and get it ready and on dry concrete so that we can set our posts on those. So now that Landon's got this nice and dried up, we can run our Lexcel. So what we'll do is we'll run a bead along the inside, about 1 inch away from our chalk line. We'll put our sill seal down, then we'll put a line on top of the sill seal on this side of the bolts, and that will give our seal from the inside to the outside of the foundation. So I want to make sure my bead attaches to the old plate. Nice. We've got some little deformities in the concrete here, so I'm gonna make sure to do a little extra sealant here. And now here along the wall, I'm gonna run a bead to the outside. Now I should emphasize that this is totally optional. You don't need to do it, it's not required by code, at least here, but it does help with air sealing and sealing for bugs. It doesn't hurt, but it's certainly not necessary. So now same thing, when we're setting our sill seal, we want to set it just a little bit in from our chalk line, because when we're setting our green plate, we want to be able to see our chalk line. So it's a little faint here because of the water, but I'm about 3/8 away from my chalk line. Which just gives me a little bit of room to really make sure I can see what I need to. Another advantage of using the sealant. So now we're going to run our next bead on the outside. Same exact concept. just like that. So now getting our nuts and washers on there, bolting this thing down nice and tight. One advantage of not shimming your walkout walls level and just stick framing them is it lets you put your plate totally tight, which gets you a better sealant. It does make it a little bit harder to frame. If we had left these perfectly level, we could have just measured one stud length and cut them all. Now we need to measure each individual stud, but it will get us a better product in the end. 27 1/8 times 2. Heavy. And last but not least, 27. So that's everything cut for this step. So now as we get higher, we can start to use this method to mark our studs. Put it on the plate on your layout, touch it to the chalk line, rub it back and forth, and that gives you a mark. It's faint, but it works. All right, so this walkout wall is all framed. We've got our single plate on. We've got our green plate overlapped over it, over 4 feet, and that's all tied in. So now the next step is to double top plate this wall. Now the purpose of double top plates is to overlap the walls like this. So because that wall runs all the way long, I'm gonna mark back 5.5 on that edge, and I'll show you how I can install that an easy way without needing to measure it. So how I can get this length without needing to measure it is I can measure this whole thing. I've got 2 11 3/8, so I can subtract 5.5 that way. An easy way to do that is I can set my square right here and just look at this 5.5 dimension. So I'm gonna go a little bit light to make sure I have extra room for my overlapping plates. So I'm gonna go 205 3/4. Now it's helpful to check for any crown on your top plates. I'll show you why in just a second. All right, so I can check my wall and see if there's any curvature in my wall. Now this wall has a slight curve out, so I can put my double top plate crown the opposing direction to help pull it straighter. So this board is crowned this way, wall is crowned that way. So I'm gonna put them opposite, so when we pull them together, it'll make it just a little bit straighter, which will make our life easier when we're bracing. So now, because we measured and subtracted 5.5, you can see our plate on the other side is a little bit short. 3 nails on each end and 2 nails over your studs below. The reason I like to keep the nails over the studs below is so that when other trades are drilling through here, electricians or plumbers or otherwise, they are much less likely to hit nails if we keep these over that. Now where there's a splice like this, there will be nails there. So if you can help it, it's nice to keep the splices near a stud. Single plates below, I like to do 3 nails on each side, just like that. And you can check if there's any gaps in your plates anywhere. You can hammer those plates nice and tight so our walls are good and flat. So here you can see our cutback. Now this next wall is going to have a double top plate that overlaps. So you can see our cutback lines right up at a 2x6 with a little bit of wiggle room just in case we need it to make sure our walls are plumb.
So our layout corner is over there where Jared started, and he started 15 1/4 from that. But that is a 4-foot bump out from this corner of the house. So that means this corner of the house is 4 feet in, which is perfect for us because 4 feet, that's on our layout, our 16 on center layout. So all I have to do, I don't have to change anything. I can still hook my corner and go my 15 1/4 all the way down, and it's gonna match up because, say I pull this 15 1/4 right here, I go my 4 foot, that's where his bump out happens to be. So that'll make this layout match with that side, and everything's gonna work out good. So I kind of want to talk about one thing I see the most is people trying to dodge some bolts. So you got a bolt in the way of your layout. This is a common thing you see people do. They'll just cut something out like this, make 3 cuts, and you'll kind of have to plunge, and it makes these actual ends of your stud weak and kind of just takes away the whole point of having a stud there. What we like to do in the stronger way of doing it, and it's one less cut too, you just make 2 cuts, notch a triangle out, and that is enough to get around that bolt and still give you the maximum amount of bearing for that stud. So we need a piece of 3/4 just to pack that header up to our plate height, and we don't even have steel beam set. So we haven't even touched our 3/4 plywood. So I have 2 bunks over here. I got my 1 sheet of 3/4 down, and the piece I need is 66 by 5.5. It would mess me up if I just cut a whole 66 by 5.5 out of a whole full sheet before we even started our floor. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut a 4-foot section, and then I'll cut that remainder to give me that 66. So that way, once we go start sheeting the floor, the first sheet that we have on this bunk isn't a rip. We're not gonna have to cut it down as much as we would if I took that whole 66 out of a full sheet before we have any other scrap around. So that's just something you wanna keep an eye on, is how you use your material to your advantage and to other people's advantage too. Helps the homeowner, helps everyone, because now just taking off 10 inches from this, we can start this on a layout and get the maximum amount of use out of this sheet as we can.
All right, so now to lay out these beam pockets, we've got this one here in the foundation, and we need to build one that goes into the frame wall over there by Landon. So what we're doing is we're pulling parallel across from here. I added the dimension of the step, so I can measure over to here, get my in and out of this beam pocket, and I can give that dimension to Landon so he can build one that's exactly the same size, parallel on the other side. Okay, so we're getting ready to set our floor beams on the walkout walls. So we're just getting them out of the snow. We're gonna get them de-iced and we'll torch them to make sure they're dry. Then we'll glue and pin our plates to the top of these. This is where having equipment like a crane or a telehandler comes in handy so you can save your backs in the long term. So we're gonna start framing this wall next. This has 2 windows in it, so we're gonna need to lay those out. So these are windows M, which I can see up here, are 4.6/5/0s, and my center line from the outside in on either side is 3'7" 3/4. So we can go lay those out now. So because we've got the step foundation here, I'm gonna pull from up here, where my framing is, and I'll use the laser to transfer my lines down. So I can adjust my laser. So I'm right on my 3'7" 3/4, right there. And that is my center line for this window. So now, this is a 4'6", which means I'm going 2'3" in either direction. I'm gonna come over to 4'6" and lay that out. So that's the outsides of my RO. So I'll do the same thing on this side. Now we can check our structural page to see how many trimmers those are. I don't totally remember. 2 trimmers, 2 kings. So now that our windows are laid out, we can lay out our studs. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did at the start. I'm gonna use my laser. I'm gonna pull. This is my driving corner, as I was talking about. I can set this right onto 15 1/4. Right there. Then from that mark, go 16 and go. So now we'll set our laser and we'll get our lines and we can string our studs all the way across this. That number is 17 foot 3.5. All right, so I've got this post cut to length now, so I can run my chalk line over the top and then I'll hook it onto this wall over here. So now on this side, I can run my line tight to the bottom plate and that'll get me my height because this plate is already installed. So I can tack my nail on top. Remember, just enough tension, but not too much so you don't snap your chalk line like me. And there we go. We're ready to go with that. And Tim just cut my plate at the exact number it's supposed to be. That number is per plan. I didn't measure anything. I made it per plan because if my green plates are off even a little bit, I can correct it now by using these plates that are cut to the exact length. So we're now measuring for some temp posts for our floor girders. You can see our beam pocket there by Landon. So the reason we're setting temp posts is so that way we can measure our steel posts perfectly to the caisson length after the steel is installed. All right, so when I'm laying out my studs, instead of setting a nail to pull 16 on center, another thing you can do is get your chisel, set it right on the corner of your board, give it a few good whacks, and then you can stick the hook of your tape measure and wedge it into that little notch. Now you can pull your layout from there. Holds your tape sturdy, but it's easy to take out when you're done. Yeah, I guess. On the dot. When you're setting your sills in, it's nice to lay them out ahead of time. So in this case, I can just set it on my header, copy that layout just like that. And now is probably a good time to explain why we put our headers at the top of the wall rather than lower. And here's the reason. Most of the time, if you have a structural header, it means there's either joists or something bearing on top of it, or there could be a point load. Now, if my header was low and the cripples were above it, and I had a point load right here, I would need to point load down from the top plates to the top of the header. But because we're below, we're actually saving material. And on top of that, this way is technically stronger because it has more lateral strength because it's tied directly into the top plates rather than being down here where it could theoretically sway a little bit more. So technically it's stronger and it saves a little bit on material. Another bonus is that if something needs to change with the window RO at any point, you have your maximum height that you can move up to, and it's an easier fix if it needs to be done. So we have our beam pockets there. We've got our tent posts created with some bracing to keep them up, and our beam pocket on that side. We're now ready to set these. So our beams are plated, so we've got them glued down with the proper setback to tie into our old plates, and they're pinned down, 2 foot on center, alternating. And at our splice, we've got them cut back, so we'll drop a 12-foot 2x4 in there to tie them together when it's done. And we're rigging up our first beam to set. So here, our beam is set. You can see we've got this splice plate over here with 3 bolts on each side. So Tim's getting those locked in right now. And then we're gonna string line this beam to get it nice and straight. So how we do that is we pull a parallel dimension, or actually rather, we'll just put a string all the way across, and then we'll nail 2x4s to the top of this and then nail them to the green plates to hold it nice and straight. Now we're gonna boom up this wall as it's ready. We'll just do a strap around each header. So this is our wall we just stood. So we can pull this over nice and tight. In theory, beautiful. You see we're nice and flush there, and we're nice and tight where the plates meet. And this corner is now tied together. Can you pass me a coil, Landon? Thank you. Oh yeah. So now that the walkout walls are framed and our beams are set, the next thing we need to do before we can get ready for the next stage is we need to do something that's called plumbing and lining our walls. So we're gonna get started on that now. So what the process of plumbing and lining looks like for these walls is it's gonna be leveling our corners. Every corner will get leveled and then we'll string a line to make sure the walls are perfectly straight. And that is what will prep us for our next stage. So a lot of guys would use a plate level to do this. We use something called a 5-point laser. Also, you could use a plumb dot laser, which is basically the same thing. This one in particular is great because I can pivot it around and I can butt this right up to my plate and it'll give me the edge that I can plumb up from. So I can check plumb on this corner. As you can see here, the laser set right on the edge of the plate, so the line or the dot is just split by the bottom plate. Up at the top, you can see we're in about 3/8. So that means we need to push this wall out a little bit. So we'll get our brace material and we'll do that next. To start the bracing process, the first thing that we can do is we can set a couple hand nails in the end of a brace. I like to do 3. That's just gonna make this next step a little easier. And then we'll lean that up high over the wall like that. And we can repeat that process everywhere we're gonna need a brace. So here, we have our shorter 2x4s that we were using to plumb our posts to frame our walls. But now that we're plumbing our top plates, we want longer braces that we can run all the way to the top plates. Because I don't have an inside corner to lean this on, I'm just gonna lean up on the plates. You can also have another carpenter up on the walls and they can nail it when it's ready. It's important when we're doing this that we keep the braces below the top plate. Now in this case, where the brace sticks above the top plate, our material was too long, so we'll need to get a saw and we'll need to cut that down so we can frame our floor over it. Beautiful thing. We like to nail all the tops of our braces first, so that way we're done on the walls. So now we can all come down, and if we need help pushing on walls, we're all here to do it. So it's especially nice if you know which direction your wall needs to go to set your brace up in the direction it needs to push. So that way you can wedge a bar under your brace and use it to push the wall that way, which makes the leverage just that much easier. So now in theory, because this wall is parallel and this side is plumb, this side should also be plumb. It is good to double check. All right, so now we'll plumb this corner. Beautiful. So our next process is stringing the walls, or we can sight them if they're short enough. This wall's got a slight inward bow, so we can put a brace on it that we're gonna run diagonal, probably to here, to push it out straight. And the reason we're not shooting into the slab is because this is gonna be a finished slab, so we don't wanna scuff it up. All right, so that completes this phase of the project and we're ready to start the next phase, which is gonna be framing the floor. So the first thing that we need to do to lay out our floor is to lay out all of our beams. So the engineer gives us these centerline dimensions. So I can read these off the plans and give them to Derek so he can mark them out on the beams. Now we lay out our LVLs first because those locations are more important than the joists. So we lay out those higher priorities first and then we can run through and lay out all of our joists. There's one more beam that's right there. It's only a couple feet from the edge. Let me just check that. 3 foot, 2.5, and go. So now that our beams are marked out, the next thing we need to do is mark our center lines from our toilets on the green plate. And we mark those because we don't want a joist to be running down the center of where the toilet goes because the drain needs to drop down right below it. So we need to keep our joists off to the side. So if we mark those now, when we lay out our joists, it'll tell us if we need to move them one way or the other. So this first one here is 26 foot and 3/4 to the center line of that toilet. So we can mark that now. All right, so we can hook that, and you can see right here, we've got our toilet center line. So now when we lay out our joists, we will know that they don't hit the toilet. So if you remember, when we laid out our walls for the studs, we go 15 1/4, so that way the center of our stud is on 16 inches. The reason we go 3/4 back is because our studs are 1.5 inches wide, and half of that is 3/4. So we say 15 1/4 and go because the 1.5 inch stud will be centered on 16 inches. And we're gonna do the same concept with our floor joists, but these floor joists aren't 1.5 inches. They're about 2 5/16. So half of that is just over 1 1/8 inches. So we're gonna go 1 1/8 inches less than 16 inches, which is 14 7/8. So 14 7/8 and go, which means we're gonna go back 1 1/8 inches from every red mark when we're doing our joist layout. So if you remember when we did our walkout walls, we picked this corner to be our primary layout corner. So we're gonna pull 16 in center all the way across this way and all the way across this way for our studs. Now because our floor joists only run this way, I'm gonna be pulling 16 on center across this way on all these walls. So what I can do is I can hook this wall and I can lay out this wall, I can hook it and lay out this wall, and all walls running that way. And I'm gonna need to do some math to account for the difference in steps when this wall doesn't run through, because I still want these studs and joists to line up, but my exterior wall doesn't continue through there. So I'll need to do math to account for that offset. So in order to make sure we're perfectly straight, we're gonna snap a line connecting our first layouts. Hook the corner 13 foot 11 and back is where the cantilever goes. Cantilever starts at the corner and ends at your first mark, and this is the start of your next cantilever. Next up is 30 foot 11. So for this long LVL we're gonna nail them together in place, but we're setting them over the wall to keep them nice and flat, so when we nail them, we don't nail a bow into it. Plus 7'5". Follow-up question. Hangers and LVLs right now, and then we push it out. I think it would be easier to get over there because we can push an LVL rather than trying to set an LVL in the middle of there. You know what I mean? I mean, we have the scaffold too, so setting them later wouldn't be bad either. I was thinking we could maybe put them a little long, and then like when it's up, we can measure them. I'm cool either way though. Yeah, I don't care either. Anytime we're setting beams, it's nice to be able to pull your layout for your hangers and set them before you put your beam out. This lets you get a little bit of a head start, and this way we can set our hangers flat on the ground rather than in the air off of a ladder. So we're just gonna go on my side of that double. This one's great, it's like perfectly flush. Do we want to go like all the way to the layout, or do we want to just go partially? I was thinking we could just go, even this might be enough to where when we drop these, it won't just like tip out, you know? And then honestly, Landon, I would just say, just watch out for when they hit. Wow, that was a bounce. Are you tight, Derek? Do you need to go to you at all? All right, ready? A double, yes, a double at the outside across. No, between them, but on this end. And then same thing between these two. Yes.
So we're just gonna bend our hangers then?
Or if they gave us concealed flange, we'll have to check. So the next step we're going to do on this floor is we're going to start running our rim joist. So I'll show you guys a couple tricks on how to make sure that stays nice and straight. So the first thing we do is we run a chalk line on the green plate 1.25 inches back, which is the thickness of this rim joist. Sometimes rim joists can be 1 1/8 inches, so make sure you check which material you have. I like to use the chalk line to make it straight because just in case there's any deflections or discrepancies in the green plate, that'll make sure it's nice and true. Go for it. And then if you want to snap this side too. So now with all of our rim done and our layout done, we're ready to start bringing joists out. Now I'll first show you how we can do it without using heavy machinery, and then once we get the crane turned on, I'll show you some of that as well. So what we can do is we can slide out on our beam that we already set, and then we can just roll all the way over to our layout. Well, I guess we can just set this one first, and then I'll just give you a dimension from the layout. So the stairwell is behind you. That's where we're gonna set back 1 1/8 inches, because, right. No, we're gonna snap a line and hit it. So that goes, and go 3 1/4 light. So here we have a joist layout that barely hits this bolt. So what we can do in this case is me and Derek set it where it goes. I set it on the bolt and I smacked the top so it marked it. Then I got a paddle bit and drilled a little hole in it. So now we can set our joist and it'll fit right over the top of that bolt and still sit nice on the concrete. Are you a little bit long, like 1/8? Here, nail it where you like it and then I'll force down. When we're nailing our joist to the green plate, you want to do 3 nails total. If you can fit both sides, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, then you can nail through the top flange and through the bottom flange. So here, we ran these joists long because we've got a cantilever, and they are gonna need to bring the grade down below this because we're a little bit too close to the framing. But what we did is we ran these joists long and we're snapping a line on top. We subtracted the thickness of our rim joist so we can nail that onto the outside, and then we're gonna use a little bit of a different method to cut these joists. 98 1/8. Let's just check the far end one. Yeah, that's perfect. As you know, our joists are running this way, but I have layout on my rim joist this way. The reason for that is between our last joists and the rim joist, we're gonna be running blocks like this to help stabilize the wall that sits on top of this, and it'll also give us extra ceiling backing when we're framing in beneath this. So when we put our blocking on our joist ahead of time, it makes it a lot easier to nail it. And then we can just drop it right into place where it goes. Over here, it's helpful to have the guys go through all the joists because they send out a bunch of different lengths, but the way they have to ship them, they're all mixed in together. So we can separate them out, so that way we know and have a good catalog of all the different lengths we have, so we know where to best utilize the different numbers. All right, so you can see we've got our glue. This is our Advantech subfloor adhesive. We put it in the bottom of our hangers. That helps eliminate floor squeaks. If you put glue in the bottom of your TJI, LVL, any kind of hangers, that'll just keep everything a lot tighter and keep it from moving around. Derek, I was just explaining this to Landon, but because we scooted this LVL in order to get that long one, this drop shower is only to here. So instead of doing it all 7 1/4 and building up this section, if we have leftover 11 7/8 LVL, we could just run the 11 7/8 here and just notch the drop into it. We're gonna make a jig for cutting our mid-span blocking for our floor joists, and we can usually do this out of 3/4 plywood.
Okay.
This is gonna sit on that rim joist there. All right, so we've got our joists rolled out, and I've snapped my line. I'm about 3/16 to 1/4 back from the inside of my rim joist, and that's to account for the extra length that we'll get from this curve up to the rim joist here. Now these joists are a little bit thicker to account for the extra strength we need in this area, so we're gonna need a bigger saw to cut them, at least if we don't wanna use a Sawzall. So that's why I got this saw. right? Saute, when we're nailing these, you do 2 nails on one side, 1 nail on the other side, and then you do 2 nails through the top, 2 nails through the bottom. Beautiful. So when we're framing the floor, one of the most important things to consider is your stair hole opening. So you can see this behind me has got a 45-degree angle in it, which makes it a little bit trickier to lay out, but it's still possible to do. Now that's critical because once this floor is sheeted, all those beams and joists are going to be locked in place and we won't be able to adjust anything. So the stair hole is always a priority in terms of dimensions and layout. So with all of our joists in and the stair hole completed, we run roll blocking along our beams, and we're gonna run some mid-span blocking as well. But we're gonna sheet before we run our mid-span blocking. The beams are easier to block because you can stand on the beam while you install the blocks all the way across. But the mid-span blocking are a little bit harder because there's not a working surface to stand on while you nail those. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sheet the floor, and then at a certain level, we're gonna stop the sheets, install our row of blocks from the subfloor, and then we'll continue our sheets. We're gonna do mid-span blocking in this section and mid-span blocking in the other corner of the house as well. The other thing that we need to make sure we install before we sheet the floor is our squash blocks for point loads. Basically what that is, it's a little post that'll transfer weight from on top of the floor down to the green plates or the walls below. This spot in particular is important because this won't be accessible later on in the process. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut 3 2x4s, the height of the rim joist, put them in here, nailed into the corner, and that'll provide backing for the post that's gonna sit on top of this corner later on. To prep our floor for subfloor, what we're gonna do is we can measure the total width of our seat, which because of the tongue is about 4 3/8, and we're gonna snap that parallel. Now this is optional, but I like to start my sheets from my same layout corner. That just makes my plywood seams on the layout as well, which can be beneficial later on for blocking purposes and for other trades. 4 3/8. Beautiful. Like it? And then honestly, I would say let's start sheeting here. Once we get to this edge, then we'll pull parallel to your mark, run over there and snap it with whatever the layout difference is, and we'll go from there. So when we're laying down our subfloor, we want to use our subfloor adhesive. We're going to want to go out approximately 4 feet. And I like to go in and out. Kind of helps the full width. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful. Yep. Slam, mask up. In some areas where we have a stair hole or any kind of spot where you need to cut out the sheathing, it can be nice to run it long and use a flush cut router to trim it. Especially in this case where our stair hole is skewed at a 45-degree angle, this will make it a lot easier rather than laying out and marking all of the cuts. So Landon gave me a measurement of 71 to cut for his sheet over there. An easy way that I can cut that is you can use math and subtraction in order to mark it. So this overall sheet is 96 inches. So if I want to cut 71, I can either scribe over 25, cut it like that. You can also use the same concept using the saw without marking a line. Nice. That just So when we're setting these sheets, you'll notice it tells us to space our panels 1/8 of an inch. So an easy way that we can do that when we're slamming them, we can set our sheet right there, tight to the other one. We can give ourselves a crow's foot right on the edge of it. Now when we go to drop our sheet, I'll let it down as far as I can reach. Set it there. If it doesn't go in all the way, you can just give it a little push. So now I can see my crow's foot, but I want to get that 1/8 inch past my crow's foot so I know we have the recommended spacing. Just like that. We can tack a few nails in that corner. And you don't want to slam too hard, but you can just give it a little push. It'll fully seat into the groove, and he can keep nailing off. So we use this method. One of us slams the sheets and the other one nailing, and we work our way down the rows doing it all that way. So now with our floor completely sheeted, it's time to sweep it off and get it nice and clean and prep for the next stage. Now it's best to do one final look through of the floor once you're done. Make sure all your joists are nailed off, your seams, and to check all of your rim joists to make sure you got all your nails all the way around. It'll be a heck of a lot harder to nail it once you've got a wall sitting on top of it. I feel like this wall and then this back garage wall would be the best to square everything. I think we can just run this one long as a control line, and then we can check our overalls and everything.
53 is from there to there.
Okay, so we can check that. I want to burn me a foot on the rim joist if our sheet isn't quite perfect. Like
okay, you're a foot right on the rim.
That couldn't be more perfect.
That's what I like to hear. Got the thick line. I'm perfect.
So that was 36.
So that could be
37.
That could be our
marked a foot. So 48.
48?
If we have enough room to do that. Big old 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, massive. Did you hear what Tay said?
What?
He's like, I've seen like 5 of your guys' videos when you guys are doing this. It's like I'm in a movie, but I'm here now to watch.
So now that we have this wall and this wall snapped long as our control lines, we can use those to snap out all the rest of this area. And then we'll move over and continue snapping the rest of the house. Okay, so then our inside to inside for this section is 10 foot 7 3/4 and go 2x6. Beautiful.
13 foot 5.5. You there?
Yep.
Come on, make it. Oh yeah. 8.5 inch there.
Is that the one where? Okay.
Sweet, is that all over X? I think that is.
Like it?
Yep.
And then 18 foot 5.5. And go. Does not get any better than that. It's literally perfectly in line with our edge, which should put us pretty in line with our stair hole as well.
What did Kate bring you, a steak? Yeah, I just forgot. Not the I also brought steak, but it was cooked last night. Do me first. Tay, when I was over there, I was like, "Are you doing me, Tay?" And he goes, "I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what that means."
Do we have the 9'2" yet? It looks like you have 9'2".
Yeah, I already got this.
Okay, so we have our 9'2".
Well, I actually did 3'10", but same.
Okay, right. So 11'2" minus 6'6" is 4'8".
There. Okay. Totally not confusing. 3/8 from this wall.
Well, we have this width already.
Yep.
So we just need 8 foot 7 3/8. So now with our floor all snapped out, the next thing we're going to do is what we call plating the floor. So we're going to take some 8-penny nails and we'll tack our plates, bottom and top plates, to the floor, and we'll be able to do our layout on the whole floor plan at once. Yeah, for the plates, the top and bottom plates. right, so now with plates down, and the guys are still finishing them off, but we can get a head start on the layout. Me and Landon are gonna go through and lay out all of our ROs for windows and doors. Then we'll go through and lay out our posts. And then lastly, we'll go in and lay out our studs. The reason for that is we want our ROs and our posts to take priority over studs. So we don't want there to be a stud layout in the middle that can muddy things up and make it confusing when we're framing. So Landon is reading the plans. He's gonna give me center line dimensions.
You can start from that one. 3'7 3/4 is the center of window.
Okay.
And that header material is double 7 1/4 LVL.
All right, so our front door goes centered on here. So I can pull from here to here, 80 inches, which means that 40 is my center line. Now we can go 1'7" either direction. That's gonna be the width of my door, about 1.5 inches, a T and a K. Then I'll come back 3 inches, I'll mark 1.5 inches, and 0, T, K. That is a 3080 door. It's a 2x2x8 header right there.
Get this guy a girlfriend.
So now that our plates are all down and the ROs are all filled out, the next thing we can do is lay out our wall intersections. So I like to use something called the universal square from Husky. You can lay it on top and you can mark all sides of your plate. All right, so now with our plates down and our ROs marked, the next thing we're gonna do is mark our studs. You guys have heard me say it a bunch of times. These two walls in this corner are our layout walls. So what this means is that either of those walls I can hook my 100-foot tape on, and I can just mark my studs, 15 1/4 and go. And I can run this down the whole house. And I can use this line here on any wall throughout the entire house. I can pull it all the way across. The same goes for that wall going this direction. So for this wall here, I don't want to pull my layout from here. I'm actually going to use my longer tape. I'll come down over here. I'll make sure I'm in line because this is my starting wall for layout. I can pull my layout through here. So here's what the marks look like when we put them down. This tape has these black marks that show where the stud goes. This would be centered on 16 inches. So we come under, do a line down, and then a stripe over. And then once we're done hitting all the plates like that, we'll come back through with what we call a plate marker. This is the universal square from Husky. You do a line down the face. We'll do a line down the face, and then an easy way to mark an X on 2 plates is to do 2 C's, just like that. And then using this tool, we can also now transfer our door layouts from the top plates as well. Even though we're inside a door, we still want to lay out our studs because that is going to be our cripple layout. The other things we're going to mark is our corners. So you can set this over your corner, mark the sides and the top. I like to do crow's feet on the edges there, which will show me where to stop my double top plate. Then we do a fish, which means that the stud goes here, and then X on the sides, just like usual. All right, so in spots like this, where I don't have a wall I can pull from over there for my layout, what I can do is I can pull to my layout here. You can see I'm gonna burn 21 3/4 and slide to the end, hold 21 3/4 on the edge of my plate, and I can just continue my layout from there. Oh wait, did you actually get to see it? Another thing we like to do for our layout, sometimes instead of doing X's, we'll do a colored stripe. So at this stage in plating, an advantage of this is you get to, you can get a pretty good idea of what the floor plan looks like and what the house will feel like walking through it. So we like to take advantage of that when we bring the homeowners out and we actually walk through the floor plan and can make small adjustments on things they like. One example here is this corner here. This was a small closet, but they actually decided they're gonna cut off this corner to create a little bit more space in the bathroom. That's a lot easier to change now when it's just plates as opposed to fully framed walls. So I can cut those out now. And that's a lot easier change order than what it would normally be. You can see here, we've got some layout scribbled out as well. This was another area where the homeowner liked the look of the door being closer to the corner and leaving more wall space on this side. All right, so now with our plates all done and the layout done, the last step we're gonna do before these are ready to frame is we're gonna cut our double top plates on top of these as well. The other advantage of that is where there's a lot of interesting and complex corners intersecting, we can get the overlaps perfectly and pre-cut ahead of time, so that way we don't need to take time to do that while we're framing. All right, so doing the top plates, the double top plates, ahead of time allows us to get intricate connection details like this done ahead of time, and it helps us ensure that everything is going to fit together really well. We can tack our plates just like we do with our top and bottom plates. Now the reason you want to leave it as long as possible is we have a break in our actual plates right here. And the code is that you need to have at least 4 feet of top plate on either side of that break to avoid having to nail a strap onto that later on. So that's why you can use notches like that to eliminate further hardware down the line. Doing our double top plates ahead of time as well also gives us the opportunity to put our truss layout down. So this house is pretty straightforward. All of our trusses run north to south, and it's just 2 foot from each side and they meet in the center. So I can just hook this exterior corner right here. I like to use a black crayon, and then I just go 2 foot and go. I can run that all the way through this section of the house. So now with our truss layout complete, all that is left to do is we'll label our walls. We'll label it on the floor and on the plates, so that way we know where they go. Then we can move the walls to the garage and we can start framing. So I like to go alphabetical. I start with my first layout wall. So I'll go A on top, A on the floor, and then I'm gonna do it on the plates individually too. So now that our plates are all labeled on the floors, we can start removing the plates and stacking them in the garage so we can pull them when it's time to frame. Gotta be careful. It's a little more tricky when there's double tops on them.
Definitely is.
A lot more to think about. So now with all of our plates done and a section of the floor cleared out, if you have heavy machinery on site, what I recommend doing next is framing your garage walls, because we can utilize the subfloor to nail our plates down and get them squared so we can put our sheathing on before we set them. I only recommend this if you have machinery, because we can use the crane to lift this wall and set it in place when it's time to stand it. Right. Drywaller's got that. Oh yeah. So here on our garage wall, you can see our layout calls for 4 king studs and 3 trimmers. So we nail our header to the top plate, we can nail our king stud to the header and add the rest of our king studs. Now it's time to add the trimmers. Now an easy way to add your trimmers in this situation, you can grab 3 of your studs that you're going to cut your trimmers out of, drop them into place, slide them up tight against your header, and you can set your saw right on your pack and run it through. Now you can finish those cuts. And you'll have perfect trimmers. You want to make sure you nail these one by one, because if you're trying to nail through more than one at a time, your nails won't reach. So I nail the end, come in and get the middle flush, nail the other end, and then you can fill in the middle. and you can add the rest of your plies. All right, so now that this wall is framed, the next step before we can put plywood on it is we need to square it. So what we do is I tack one nail in the bottom plate into the floor on each end. Then I can look down the bottom like this, make sure it's nice and straight. I put a nail in the middle, and now the bottom is straight and we're ready to square it. So what we're gonna do is we'll pull our diagonals. We'll each hook a corner of the bottom plate, and we'll just read these numbers. I've got 182 and 3/4.
Got 182 and 5/8.
Okay, so I'll go a tiny bit to you, about a 1/16. So now we can mark our plate there to make sure it doesn't move. And we can tack one more nail in the top plate. So that way it's ready for sheets. And we're ready to go.
Sheets are coming anyway.
Well, if we cut it first, then we'll be okay. So when you're nailing multiple studs together, or rather just 2 studs, I'll show you 2 ways you can do it. If you nail straight through, or if you put a slight angle on your gun. Now flip it over and look at the difference. When I nail straight through, I leave about a 1/4 inch sticking out, and that's super sharp. And that could draw blood, it could put a hole in your favorite hoodie. It's just not good news altogether. So if you're only nailing 2 pieces together, just put a slight angle on your nail gun and it'll keep the other side of the lumber nice and smooth. Another thing, when you're nailing packs, if you're nailing more than 3, it's good practice to put your square on the side of the board to make sure your studs are all nice and flush. After a while, you'll get pretty good at eyeballing that, but it's always good to double check. Now we have these high pressure nail guns that work real well, but it's not uncommon to have to nail walls together. And it's time to do that when you grab a handful out of your pocket. You can face all the nails like that, and send them out, one at a time. You can see here in our bottom plate, we've got a hole that lines up right with our stud. So if you look on this side of the plate, I've got a V cut into my stud, so that way it can bridge over that, and when we set this wall, we'll still be able to access the top of our bolt and thread our nut and washer on there. So the garage wall that we're framing is going to sit right here, and we want our RO for our garage door to come all the way to the slab, even though our wall sits up here. So what I needed to do is I can measure from the top of my slab to the top of my foundation here, and I've got about 6 3/8. So I need to compensate for 6 3/8 to get my garage header RO. So we'll set our tape out long, slide it down. Right here, I'm going to put it on 6 3/8 on the bottom of my green plate, just like that. And then the top of my RO is going to be 8 foot, but I need to add 1.5 inches for our garage jam material. So I'm going to go 8 foot, 1.5. Then I'm going to mark another 1.5 inches for my top sill.
So now that we're all done sheeted here, during the squaring stage, we did a little keel mark on our toenails down, so we made sure the nail didn't, or the wall didn't move. So now we're going to pull those nails, and it's going to be free to be able to get set by the crane.
Now squaring this wall is tricky because our bottom plate isn't continuous. So the first thing we need to do, we can tack this corner, we can pull parallel on the top, we'll pull the bottom to be the right dimension, and then we'll tack that side. So I'll first put a nail right here to keep this side in place. What's your number, Landon? 261. Okay, 261. So then over here, you can see I'm about 261 and a half heavy. Hold me at the bottom. I'm just going to mark it on the floor. Slightly heavy, just like he said. And then now, in order to get this parallel, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack my nail, but I'm not going to sink it all the way. I'm just going to get it ready, and then I can use my cat's paw and use it to lever the wall over. Right to my mark. Now we're parallel. Now that we're parallel, we can sight it. Because these are so short and they're tied into the header, it's really hard for this not to be straight. So they're pretty straight. Now we'll square it just like we square any other wall.
Yeah.
You can see this side of the wall, the sheathing overhangs a little bit. And the reason for that is we're going to have another wall that runs long and caps this, and we can just account for that with the sheathing now ahead of time. So when we set these walls, we can nail them together that way. Now the only thing that's important to keep track of is your end stud on this wall. You want to make sure when you nail the sheathing to it, your stud isn't bowed out. So you can check your dimension here. And then you can come here. I like to push it an extra eighth just to really make sure you're not bowing out. And then you can put a nail into that stud to keep it where you want it. And then you're good to fully nail it off. So something I like to do on our custom homes preemptively is I'll go through our window ROs and our structural pages, and I'll make a cut list for all of our window packs. So all of this material here is everything that isn't a pre-cut stud for our window walls. So we've got headers, we've got cripples, sills,
We'll just need probably one gun, 16s.
trimmers, and that's it. That's all the components.
Kind of 4 foot for Troy.
Let me say that again, now that I know what I'm saying. Good? So here we have our headers, our sills, top cripples, bottom cripples, and trimmers. Ah, dang it. Everything that isn't a pre-cut stud for our ROs. And it's all done for the entire house. So you notice that all of our pieces are labeled with a letter. Each window on the floor plan is given an alphabetical letter to show which window it is and where it goes on the floor. And we use that same letter to introduce all of our components for it. So this window is F. So we've got top cripples for F, trimmers for F, sills for F, bottom cripples for F, and top cripples.
Did you take out the nails?
Good? All right, so you'll remember our Lexel sealant detail we did on the green plate. We're gonna do the same thing on our garage walls, even though we're framing them on the deck. Put the sealant on the edges of the plate, all the way across. On the outside edge, then I can take my sill seal, stick it on, and then use a hammer tacker and lightly staple it so the sill seal doesn't get ripped off by the wind until we set this. So now that we're going to start standing these, we can talk about the rigging. We like to use brackets that fasten on 2 faces, so that way you're never relying solely on the pull strength of the screws. In this case, when it's lifting up this way, these screws are supported by these screws, and then when we get it vertical and we're lifting up this way, these screws are supported by these screws. What else is important is to make sure that your panel is balanced, so that way it's easy to set it and you're not having to compensate for it being heavier on one side. So getting it as close to even as you can will make your setting a lot easier. So now that our panel is prepped and ready to lift, let's check out the spot where we're going to set it to make sure that's ready for a panel. So when we were framing these walls, we put our Lexel bead on the exterior on the top of the sill seal. So now we're putting our bead on the interior, which will be the opposite side where we connect the sill seal to the foundation. So now this spot is prepped and we're ready to set this first panel. It was like ABC, the whole world can hear it. Incoming. All right, so as we're getting our exteriors up, you can see we've got this long wall up. Now it's time to frame this inside wall that butts up to it. Now because this wall goes in, and I want to put my sheathing so that it caps this, I'm going to scoot it over a little bit while I frame it, so we can stand it with the crane and scoot it out that way. So here's my plates right here, slid just out of the way, so that way they're ready to go. So I'll separate my two top plates. So I'll take my bottom plate, I'll make sure the layout is facing up. I'll put it on my line at least 5.5 inches away from the other wall. Sometimes you might need to move other plates out of the way in order to have room to frame. That's no problem at all. All right, so now with our bottom plate laid out, I can tack it to my line. Now with our bottom plate tacked, we can start to lay out our studs. You can see Zach has already started bringing over some of my cut list. So how he has it set is how I like to do it. I like to keep everything vertical and in line in between my windows. So that way I can set my king studs on the outside and I still have plenty of room. All right, so now with the window pack laid out, I can start to get my studs in place. Now it's important when you're doing this to get a crown on your studs. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking down the edge of the board to see if it bows up or if it bows down. And if depending on which way it is, I want to flip it or leave it. So that way it's bowing up across like this, like a bridge. So now I've got my cut list here, and I'm going to build my window component before I start framing the wall. So the first thing I do is I get my regular studs for my king, I crown it away from the window. Now I can get my trimmer, and I'm going to take a top cripple and a bottom cripple and get those ready. Get it nice and flush. Flush in the middle. Flush on the other end, fill it back in. Now I'm going to take my top cripple, nail that to the top of my trimmer. Same goes with my bottom cripple. Now this component is ready. All right, so with the components, we can nail our header in. You can set your hammer into the header to help you nail it up flush with your king stud pack. The other side's a lot easier. If it's a little crooked, nail your low side first. And you can step on it and get it flush. Now when I'm nailing these corners of the top sill, just in case someone uses this if they're climbing down from a wall, I like to do some toenails into the trimmers as well to help keep it nice and strong. After the first sill is nailed, we can install our second sill. And now this window is fully framed and ready to go. So now, because there's multiple framers here, what you can do if all the guns are taken and they're building components, you can start to get the rest of your studs laid out and ready to go. So while he's getting the windows ready, I'll come through and I can start crowning studs and getting them ready to go. All right, so now with all of our components built and the studs crowned and ready to go, we're ready to start nailing. In this case, I like to stand with the wall ahead of me, the studs to my left, so the gun's in my right hand, and I can just walk forward. That way, I don't worry about tripping anything. I'm watching where I'm stepping, and I can think ahead of what I'm going to be doing next. All right, so now with the wall framed, before we can sheet it, we got to put in our blocking. So we have our line snapped where the edge of the sheet goes, and we have our sheet running long to break into the middle of our rim joist below. So now for cutting blocks. I like to get, if we have any twisted lumber, this is a great time to use it up. So I've got a super twisted 20-footer that I'm going to use here. Now most of you should know that a rear handle saw, the left side of the table is 1.5 inches from the blade, and the right side of the table is 3.5 inches from the blade. I can use that to my advantage. So I can set my block material here, just shy of the edge of that stud. I can run my saw like this, and that'll give me a perfect block cut for this bay. I can rinse and repeat that all the way down. Now, even though my chalk line is right up here, if my line was in the center of this wall, I would still cut my blocks right here. Because since I'm using the studs themselves to get the length, if I went in the middle, these studs could either be bowed in or out really bad because there's nothing holding them sturdy there. So I want to make sure I'm cutting on the end so they keep the studs straight rather than blocking the bow into it permanently. So now with our wall frame and squared, we tack our top plate down, just like that, and this guy's ready for sheets. That's right, so after standing walls, the important thing to do is get everything tight and on the line and fasten together. Sometimes when you're standing your walls off the edge of the floor, you might have gaps between your chalk line and your wall. So you can use something called a wall puller. This is one that we made, but you can get some online as well that do the same thing. Hammer one side into your wall, one side into your subfloor, and that allows me to either push or pull the wall to wherever I need it. And now once we're on our line, we can go through a nail, 3 nails next to each stud. Now because we did a consistent layout with our studs to our joists, this nailing next to the studs allows us to be nailed directly into the floor joist. All right, so another good time-saving trick we use when we're framing is, you can see I've got this big wall racked out, ready to frame, only actually this is several walls. We've got our G wall, H, I, J, and K. I like to put them all in a row so I can essentially frame them like they're one big wall, and then we'll just stand them separately when it's time. But this helps keep a better flow because you start at one end, nail through all the bottoms, you can head to the top, do the same thing at the top, and then it really simplifies and speeds up the nailing process. All right, so I need to make some Cali corners for our walls. Here's an easy way to do that. You can tip this stud up on edge. You lift this. Put the tip of your nail gun, lift it to where it's flush right there. All right, so here we're sheeting a wall that is an inside corner. So it's really important when we're nailing this edge sheet that you want to push your end stud in a little bit. This could be bowed out a little bit, and if you nail your sheathing on with the bow out in the middle, it'll be impossible to connect your corners. So I like to kick my toe against it and push it in so I'm in just about an 1/8 and then nail it there. That'll make it a lot easier to connect this corner when it's time to stand the wall. So now that we've wrapped up our exteriors, now we can start working on our interior walls. So here you can see on my floor, I've got a mark, it's 17. So all I need to do is find my plates that are marked 17. So I've got my bottom plate, my top plate, my double top plate. So I can set this here where I'm going to frame it. I can separate my bottom and top plates. I can bend over my 8-penny nails, ready to frame. I can see I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 studs. We'll go grab our 2x4 studs now. Now we like to keep our studs, especially on interior walls, stored up on a set of sawhorses like this because it makes them much easier to grab large quantities. So an easy way to grab these, you can tip them just slightly, tip them back. That gives you a gap to fit your arms into. So we've got our studs over here and our bottom plate laid out. So next we'll start racking out the wall. You set your studs, crown facing up on each of my layouts. It's important when you're getting your top plate, you want to make sure your layout is going the same direction as your bottom plate. An easy way to bend these nails over without taking too much time, set your plate on the ground with the nails facing down and kick it at an angle. That'll bend them flat, quick and easy, and you don't have to worry about getting it stuck in the bottom of your boot. All right, and now, of course, we'll frame our wall. I like to leave my end studs in just a little bit so it's easier to get the plates tight. And because my top plate's ready, I can just come right over and get that framed. Now with that done, the next step is our double top plate. Now I know that we're gonna overhang 3.5, so I can measure 3.5, make sure I'm on the right spot. Put some nails in this. When I'm nailing my double top plate, I wanna make sure my nails stay within 3 inches of the stud, so that way this bay stays nice and open for any other trades that need to drill through it later on. And with that, the wall's ready to stand. Now I can look at my top plates and I want to make sure my double top plates line up nicely. Can slide it in. And now I want to get my bottom plate nailed onto my line. Then as I come to this wall, I can use my channel or Cali stud as a gauge. And I can nail that together. Yep, just some fuzz. There it is. Sick. So now, with our framing all done for the interior walls, the next step is to get all of our walls braced and stringed. Now this is essentially the same process as what we did with the walkout walls. We go through everything, nail the tops of the braces onto the walls, so that way we're completely done up high, and then we'll come down and we'll nail blocks down at the bottom. We'll push and pull our walls, spring braces, diagonal braces, and we'll get everything pushed plumb and straight. So the first thing that we need before we can install these trusses is going to be this booklet here. Now the truss manufacturers should provide this to you with every truss order. So what this has is it has all of the info. We call this the truss profiles. And at the very back of the booklet, you can usually find 2 or 3 copies of the truss roof layout. Now you might notice I've got my pinky wrapped up. An important thing to remember with trusses is these metal plates are really sharp, and moving them around, if you're not careful, can scratch you up pretty good. That's exactly what happened here, so make sure you're careful. So the first thing we do with our truss order is we can get our layout and we can look for our gable trusses. Now these are usually our trusses that are on the edges of the wall and run in line with the wall. So what we want to do is we want to find those trusses, we want to pull them out and get them ready for plywood, because we like to sheet our gable trusses on the ground if we have the opportunity. So what the guys are doing right now is separating out the trusses, getting them closer to where they're going to need to be with the crane, and prep for our truss day. So you can see we set our 5-point laser on the bottom plate and it shoots up to the top. It's a little hard to see, but that laser is right on the edge of the plate. It's just about perfect, honestly. All right, so you can see here, in order to get our gables prepped to set, the first thing we do is sheet them in zip, get the seams taped and rolled, and then we can frame on our overhang for the roof. I like to include a strap across the joints because it helps to keep it tight in case of any deflection while we're craning it around. And then back here, you can also see that we have a ledger attached. That's because this section of the house bumps out. We can preemptively put our ledger on and block it, so that way when we're sheathing this roof, it's ready to roll. Now let's take a second to look at this up close. So you can see here, we've got our 12-inch overhang total. So we've got a 2x6 on the bottom, a 9-inch stud, and then a 2x6 on top. Now the 2 plates together equal 3 inches. So we subtract 3 inches from 12, and that gets us our 9-inch block there. So here, in order to get the best rigging, we want to find our center point, and we want to basically take the length of these straps, which are 20-foot straps, but because we're cradling them, it's 10 feet. The ideal rigging disbursement is if you have 10 foot of strap on each side, you want to have 10 foot between them. So we want approximately 5 feet between them. A little less is better than more. That should get us a good distribution of load on the straps, and it should help keep us fairly balanced as well. A whole lot of truss. So you can see here, when we're cutting out little triangles to run our straps through our top chord of our truss, we take that triangle and we tack it to the face of the truss there. So when we're doing Soffit-Fascia or siding, later on, we can patch it back in easily. Hallelujah. Dude, I can't even believe how sick this is. Golly, dude. We're so sick. So now with the trusses installed, before we sheet, we want to get our truss bracing on and we want to get our drywall backing on. So for 2x4 walls like this, it's really easy to run a 2x6 centered over it, and that'll give you an inch of backing for the ceiling on either side. Can you get me a 2x6, 7 feet long? Thank you, sir. So I can center my 2x6 on the 2x4. And now this 2x4 is backed on both sides. So you can see here, we have something that we call a dead space, and these need fire blocking, which you can use 3/4 inch plywood as for that. So I'm gonna run some blocks along this as ledgers, and I'll drop this in now. Believe me, it's a heck of a lot easier to do it now than to do it later. And now this seals up the space, so no air will come through into the attic. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do in this section with the trusses set and our gables up is we're gonna cut our tails and install our subfascia. And this usually, especially on small runs, can be done by a single carpenter. So what I like to do is grab my subfascia material and lean it up between one of the bays out of the way before I climb up. So now our overhangs were already cut to the right length when we framed it on the wall. So all we need to mark is this side. What I'm marking is 10.5 from the framing, so that way when we add our 1.5 inch subfascia, we have 12 inches total, which will give us just the right amount of space to nail our soffit. So now with our speed square, we can take a stair gauge, put it on our 6/12 pitch, and I can reach under, line it up with my chalk line on top, and mark it. I like to mark the left side because that is much more comfortable to cut with the skill saw. And I'll go through and mark all of these even around the corner, so that way when I start cutting, I don't need to stop and remark anything. Now these tails are ready to cut. So I'll start all the way on the far right side and just cut my line on all of these. Now with our tails cut, we're ready to install our subfascia. Now this isn't totally necessary, but I prefer to use a cordless nail gun for situations like these where a hose can be limiting in some ways. Now hanging subfascia by yourself can be pretty tricky. There's a few things that can make it a little easier. So before I set it up here, I'm gonna set a little nail right here. That'll make sense in just a moment. So I can slide this up here, rest it on my nail, and I can rest it on my wall over here. Now I'm gonna want this subfascia to die into this plywood right here. So I can slide this over to where it's about 1/8 shy of that plywood. Now, while I'm sitting on my nail there, I can put a layout line on the top of my subfascia that shows me where that's gonna nail, and I can now pivot this out. I wanna be just a little bit past that corner, and I'm gonna give myself 2 toenails. through the corner, just like that. When I come over to this side, where I've got my nail here, I can slide off, come to the edge, and just a little twist. We'll pull that 2x6 right down to the face. I like to give 3 nails per tail because sometimes some of the framers will want to step on these and you want to make sure it's nice and strong. Now what we do is we plane our tail down to the center of our subfascia. We might need to pull it either up or down a little bit in order to hit our mark. Do any fancy toenails or any. So now with our subfascia on, the next thing to do is mark for our roof sheathing. So we can split our tape in the middle of the subfascia and mark 4 foot. Do that on each end. What's nice is here you can see that same mark is going to break right in the middle of our overhang framing. All right, and then we can, dude, this looks like it might be just under 8 feet. Cut 2 inches off, Zach. What's nice is after you have the first row set, you can just walk like a normal person. Look at that, check out that line there. The perfect placement for the stack now. Guy here will go 47 3/4. All right, a little 61 action. I got like 26 here. So let's go, we can go 25 there, 25 on one end to 25 3/4 on the other. All right. I'm gonna need to cut this side back a little bit. Easy peasy. piggyback trusses. We've got our 2x4s running flat along the tops, and we just stack our piggybacks right on top of those. Now it's important when you're laying these flat 2x4s to make sure you're set back far enough from the corner, because you need to line up with that. So these are in place. Slide it down either side. That looks nice. You can get these all nailed off. It's cold. Nice, looks good. So here we have our overframe that we're gonna put in here, and because our ridge is too long, what we're gonna do is we cut these rafters short so we can slide our ridge up underneath, and then we can nail it to our gable, and we can nail it to these rafters, which will let us fill in the rest of this. Because this ridge doesn't terminate on the roof, it's gonna terminate back here with another common rafter at the end of it. All right, so here to get our rafter that comes through here to our ridge, where it bears on the pitch there, we have our 612 angle of this roof bearing on a 612 this way. So that's not just a regular 612 plumb cut, it's basically gonna be double a 612 subtracted from 90. So for a 612, we have about 27 degrees, which double is 54, subtracted from 90, let's see, that would give us 36. Mark that on this, 36. That looks great. That's our seat cut for that guy. Do you guys want to get all of our lengths measured? We'll do both sides at once, because this is a longer one, we're going to run one side and then the other and work our way across like that. So what we can do, we can get one of our extra 2x12s that should be over there and just run it onto one of these guys. Like run it onto that middle piece and then onto the roof so we have something to stand on to measure the top. Know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now I can line my rafter up flush, get my seat cut where it's nice. And this will come across just like that. This is a little bit odd of a way to do it because our ridge isn't quite long enough. But we can add another post at this joint here that'll keep everything nice and strong. And then nail through the ledger this way, because that'll be the easiest to hammer it tight. So 213 and 1/8, the exact same as the other side. That's a good sign. Nope. So here, we've got two roof pitches dying into each other, and we're gonna have something called an irregular hip. It's called an irregular hip because this is a 612 and this is a 912. Something else that makes this unique is that it's also an overframe. So we're not framing dying into other rafters, we're dying on top of the sheathing. So what I like to do in this scenario to figure out my rafter numbers, so I'll run a string line on one edge of where the rafter is going to be, and I can use my speed square off of that to get the angles. So I'll first mark my plumb line right there, and I can check my square off of my plumb line like that. I can get my plumb cut, it's 22.5 degrees. I can get my bevel, just 33 degrees, but it's going to be the complementary angle of that, so it's going to be 57 degrees. I can come to the bottom, I can do the same thing down here. Here I've got 45 degrees, and my bevel for here, what I do for that is I want to set my square up parallel to the rafter. I can use my torpedo, and I get 18 degrees. So using those methods with just a string line, it ends up being a heck of a lot faster than math. I can get all those things together, and then all I need is my overall dimension to get this guy cut. 50 3/4. So this compound bevel is gonna have a 57-degree bevel, which the saw can't set to, but I'll show you a trick to get it. So I'll first cut by square on my long point, and then on the top of my rafter right here, I'll mark what my bevel needs to be. And then with my saw still set square, I can line up with that. Just cut all the way through. That gets me a nice, clean, long bevel. So now I can pull from that, my 50 3/4 number to my long point. If you remember, that was a 45 degree. So I can just use this side of my square. Now that gets our 18-degree bevel, which my saw can set to. Now we can see if our piece fits. And that's how you can measure your irregular hip rafters. So now with our roof fully installed and our tape installed and rolled, the next thing that is important that we tackle with the trusses is something we like to call truss bracing. Now the trusses will come with a little bit of paperwork with something called the truss profiles. This will have each truss labeled, and on that page there will be a little spot on the bottom right that will specify what bracing you need and where it goes on the trusses. Now this bracing is important because, as you know, the value of trusses comes from the fact that you can support an entire roof using smaller pieces of lumber like 2x6 and 2x4. Now the bracing is looks like what this 2x4 is here, running along the bottom, and inside there along the webs. Now this helps to provide a little bit of lateral support to the trusses because the sheathing applied only to the top of the trusses and the drywall applied to the bottom of the trusses provides shear, but only in those sections. And we need shear value inside the trusses in the mid spans. So that's why the truss bracing is very important. Now your truss profiles will also call the uplift force on the trusses. Now this is where you would install things like hurricane ties or truss screws. Now hurricane ties fasten to the bottom of the truss along the top of the wall, and they basically secure your roof truss to the top plate to help prevent uplift from extreme winds. Now each different kind of hurricane tie has a specific amount of uplift force that it can withstand. So it's important to read the truss profiles to make sure you're getting enough force from each different hurricane tie. A lot of times, if you need more uplift force than you can get with one hurricane tie, you can double them up and do one on each side. Now we're going to fast forward here a little bit in our framing process to show you what the importance of our studs lining up with our floor joists is. You can see here behind me, we have the HVAC techs running chases through our stud bays. And what's important is you can see they're right between the studs and there's no joist in the middle of that bay. And that goes for any other bay in this house, as long as it's not over an LVL. The importance of this is it allows the mechanical trades to be able to run their stuff through the bays without us needing to come back through and add headers in our floors so they can box around it. This is also a great portion in the house where you can see how all of our studs line up. All through those back walls. All the way through to the exterior.